TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, tensions along Israel's northern border with Lebanon escalated last night, with exchanges of fire reported throughout the night. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo receives positive feedback about the possibility that additional countries may soon follow in the footsteps of the UAE to normalize relations with Israel. A trilateral summit was held in Amman between the leaders of Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt, citing food security as the greatest challenge for 2021. Tensions along Israel's northern border with Lebanon escalated last night when an IDF force which operated near the Israeli community of Manara came under fire by unidentified militants from Lebanese territory. The IDF spokesperson's unit informed TV7 that the hostile incident occurred at 10:40 p.m. last night during unclassified operational activity in the area when shots were fired at the Israeli troops. TV7 obtained footage from the Lebanese side of the border in which exchanges of fire can clearly be heard. Thankfully, no injuries were reported among the IDF troops, and despite the heavy exchange of fire, which also included artillery fire and flares, the Lebanese militants managed to flee the area. Consequently, the IDF conducted retaliatory bombardments against Hezbollah installations in southern Lebanon. The IDF spokesperson's unit noted in a statement that IDF attack helicopters and aircraft struck observation posts belonging to the Hezbollah terror organization in the border area. And while Lebanese sources informed TV7 that the Israeli bombardment sparked a fire in the village of Mes al-Jabal, no injuries or damage were reported. Nevertheless, the mayor of the border village of Hula pointed to the fact that there was sudden movement in his village, presumably alluding to Hezbollah militants who sought to escape the area through the civilian Lebanese community.
أي مسألة يعتبر يقوموا يبلشوا قذائف منا قذائف للإضاءة فوسفورية ومنا قذائف انشطارية وغيره. نحن هلا هون اشتلقوا يمكن على طحشة.
Meanwhile, Israeli alternate Premier and Defense Minister Benny Gantz responded this morning to last night's incident, signaling to Hezbollah's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah not to test Israel's resolve.
הלילה נמשכו האתגרים הביטחוניים, גם בצפון וגם בדרום. אנחנו נמשיך לפעול להבאת שקט מוחלט בדרומה של הארץ, ובצפון לא ניתן לנסראללה שניסה לפגוע בחיילינו, אך פגש צבא דרוך ומוכן, לא ניתן לו לפגוע לא בחיילינו ולא במדינתנו. ונגיב קשה וככל שידרש לכל דבר שיקרה בגבול.
The top Israeli defense official's remarks vis-a-vis the security challenges on Israel's southern front pertain to an evident increase of terror balloons that are sent sailing from the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip toward Israel's southern communities. Consequently, dozens of fires were reported in wild forest, thorn fields, and agricultural lands, inflicting significant damage to the southern region of Israel. Furthermore, police spokesman Miki Rosenfeld told TV7 that among numerous explosions that were caused as a result of improvised explosive devices, one bomb detonated in close proximity to a group of children in the southern Israeli city of Netivot.
Police bomb disposal experts are continuing to patrol the southern part of Israel and respond to suspicious balloons attached to them explosive devices that are landing both inside community areas as well as in open areas. Yesterday, the most serious incident took place in the city of Netivot down south, where an explosion took place inside the city itself near a group of children. Luckily, no one was injured or killed as a result of that explosion. Heightened security is continuing, and our patrols also continuing in all different areas at the moment.
In response to the unceasing attacks directed by Gazan Islamists towards the southern communities of Israel, the IDF spokesperson's unit informed TV7, quote, IDF fighter jets and aircraft struck an underground infrastructure belonging to the Hamas terror organization in the southern Gaza Strip. In its written response to TV7's request for comment, it further reiterated that the IDF remains ready to operate decisively against any attempted terror activity aimed at Israeli civilians or any violation of Israeli sovereignty. In other news, British Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs Dominic Raab concluded his one-day trip to Israel and the Palestinian territories last night after meeting with the Palestinian Authority leadership in Ramallah on the latter part of the day. Among others, Secretary Raab sought to convey a message of assurance to the Palestinian leadership that Israel had indeed suspended its previously declared plan to assert Jerusalem's sovereignty over parts of the commonly referred to West Bank of the Jordan River.
The case now for direct dialogue with the government of Israel, given the UAE deal and the fact that annexation or the prospect of it has been suspended, on which I sought and received reassurances from my interlocutors in Jerusalem earlier in the day.
Among others, the British Secretary for Foreign Affairs met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who complained about the normalization of relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Abbas contended that peace cannot be achieved through bypassing the Palestinian people.
السلام لن يتحقق من خلال القفز عن الفلسطينيين نحو تطبيع العلاقات مع دول عربية، ولن يتم بصيغة وهم السلام مقابل السلام، بل إنه يتم على أساس قرارات الشرعية الدولية ومبادرة السلام العربية، ما يعني عقد اتفاق سلام مع الفلسطينيين.
Secretary Raab, who in 1998 worked for one of the Palestine Liberation Organization's negotiators of the Oslo Peace Accords, sought to alleviate the evident frustration among the Palestinian leadership by reiterating London's commitment to the two-state solution.
It's a real honor, 22 years later, to come back and to affirm, in the spirit of friendship, personally but also on behalf of the United Kingdom, our commitment to the Palestinian people, our commitment to a two-state solution, the United Kingdom's opposition to annexation of territory, and above all, we want to see the improvement of the lives of the Palestinian people, which can only be secured through a lasting peace negotiated between Israel and the Palestinians.
Despite the apparent frustration by the Palestinian leadership over the normalization accord between the UAE and Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu revealed last night that a senior Israeli delegation will join an American team for a meeting with their Emirati counterparts in the UAE next week to promote peace and normalization between the two nations. In related news, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who visited Israel on Monday as part of a Middle East tour, concluded his scheduled visits to the respective states of Sudan and Bahrain. During these separate meetings, the top American diplomat also promoted an expedited rapprochement between the Arab nations to Israel. With regard to Sudan, the U.S. State Department published a statement which read, quote, "The Secretary and General Burhan, who is Sudan's Sovereign Council Chair, discussed regional issues of mutual importance, including continued deepening of the Israel-Sudan bilateral relationship." Separately in Bahrain, a senior U.S. official informed TV7 that discussion with King Hamad Al Khalifa and Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa had been very positive in relation to a feasible rapprochement between Jerusalem and Manama. Turning now to Israel's eastern neighbor, where a trilateral summit was held between the leaders of Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. After welcoming Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi with a military honor guard, Jordan's King Abdullah II underscored to his guests that the three Arab nations must work together to deal with the region's rapid developments, including interference by external forces.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أرحب بإخواني فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي ودولة الأخ مصطفى الكاظمي في بلدكم الثاني. اجتماعنا اليوم مهم جدا في ظل هذه الظروف الاستثنائية التي تشهدها المنطقة والعالم. الأحداث المتسارعة في منطقتنا والتدخل من بعض الأطراف الخارجية تستدعي التنسيق الوثيق والعمل المشترك.
The Hashemite monarch further asserted that the Palestinian issue remains central in the region. Nevertheless, he referred to the need to attain food security as the greatest challenge for the year 2021. Thank you for watching us. As part of TV7's prayer initiative, I would like to encourage you today to join myself and the team here in Jerusalem to lift up Bulgaria in prayer for its salvation and peace, in addition, of course, to our ongoing prayers for the peace of Jerusalem, the salvation of Israel, as well as for all those who are impacted by the corona contagion and its economic ramifications worldwide. Furthermore, I would like to thank all of you who partner with us by means of prayer and finance. Since we are a donation-based ministry, TV7 Israel Productions would not be possible without your monthly dedicated support. I'm Jonathan Hassan. Have an Erev Tov u'Mevorach, and we will see you again tomorrow at the same time.